Welcome back to Cup of Joe. You'll pardon that pun. It's a series of Facebook Live conversations on topics that are among the most important to constituents in the Hampshire, Franklin, and Worcester district. We launched this series in February, thanks to Caitlin Billings, who is our fabulous Director of Constituent Engagement and Communication. And we wanted to do this to open up a new way for our team to get timely information to the people we work for. You can check out my YouTube channel to catch up on the first 3 episodes with Senator Cindy Friedman, Senator Jason Lewis, and Senator Bill Driscoll on healthcare education and emergency management, respectively. Today, we're talking to Amelia Durbin because Education Secretary Patrick Tutwiler just visited Northampton at an event that the Northampton Youth Commission organized to speak with students and faculty, staff, administrators about realities facing Western, North Central communities and rural schools and schools with what are called declining enrollment. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that. The students spoke back with Secretary Tutwiler today, and they also met with the Secretary in Boston before this about ways the Commonwealth could invest in regional schools, in district schools like Northampton, and rural schools to ensure that young people in Central and Western Massachusetts have the same opportunities to access excellent education as those students in Eastern Massachusetts. So one of the organizers, in fact, the main organizer for this event, was a junior at Northampton High School, Amelia Durbin. And I'm really thrilled to have Amelia on Cup of Joe today. Amelia is an absolute powerhouse. She is the chair of the Northampton Youth Commission's Budget Subcommittee and was the co-chair of the group for this past academic year. And I had an opportunity not only to visit with Amelia in my office with Secretary Tutwiler and a bunch of Northampton Youth Commission young people, but I also visited the Youth Commission at her invitation to talk about state funding for education and what the students could do about it. Amelia was Northampton's 2022 ambassador to Project 351, a statewide service and leadership academy. Her advocacy is broader throughout Massachusetts and to the State House, as I said, not just once either, to advocate for things like education reform. She's an avid musician playing multiple instruments in various local ensembles. I just heard her at Northampton's Memorial Day Parade yesterday. She also enjoys arranging and composing music. She is a varsity Frisbee player and does martial arts. And also very important, Amelia actually has figured out how to make a 24-hour day into something like a 72-hour day. So welcome, Amelia.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate having the opportunity to chat with you.
Well, it's really our honor, my honor. I've really enjoyed working with you so much. And today, while Secretary Tutwiler was visiting Northampton High School, I hope you heard person after person after person shout out your organizing, because not only, friends, did Amelia have Northampton's mayor and superintendent and her peers on the Youth Commission speak, but she invited representatives from for example, the Hadley Public Schools, the Amherst Regional Schools, Hatfield Public Schools, Pioneer Regional, all in our district, and then some that were not in our district. So this would be a tough piece of work for anyone, but a junior in high school did it with grace. So Amelia, could you give us a little insight just to kick this off on what made you start organizing in the Youth Commission, and why first focus on education?
Yeah, I've always been passionate about organizing. I've always been involved in organizing fundraisers and food drives and things throughout middle school and into high school. For me, education is just such a prominent thing in my life. It's what I spend 6 hours of my day every day doing. And I see how it affects all of my peers and the people around me. And so I've learned so much about education funding this past year from you, Senator Comerford, as well as we went to the Ways and Means hearing on education and local aid. And my community is very engaged in speaking about education funding. So it's just been a very prominent topic in my life. And then working with my peers on the Youth Commission, we figured out different ways to kind of engage and broader conversations. So yeah.
Well, thank you. And I should have said that you and Owen and others were at the Ways and Means Committee hearing, which was at UMass Amherst again this year and it focused on education spending. That's pre-K through higher ed and also local aid. And in fact, Secretary Tutwiler was quoted for what he said during that hearing. So I was so honored to join you today. Could you share some reactions to the conversation that the folks you invited added to, and then Secretary Tutwiler's response in the, after that, and then his response to questions? Could you just start with some just preliminary thoughts on how it all went today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I thought it went kind of shockingly well. It was really great to have so many representatives and people who are able to come. I'm really grateful that everybody took the time to coordinate and make the event happen. So I was happy with how it went. I think the Youth Commission was very excited with how it went. And yeah, just again, super appreciative of everybody who was able to come and make the event happen. So in our presentation, as you mentioned, we did quote the secretary's response to your question at the Ways and Means hearing about kind of the Massachusetts Education Department's involvement in conversations about restructuring funding formulas. And today he did have a very similar answer about kind of following with the legislature. And I mean, I think I'm still processing kind of his response and what he was saying. I personally still think it would be really beneficial and important to have his voice in conversation about education reform. And yeah, so that's kind of my initial reaction, and I hope that he continues to have these conversations. I know having him there today was really wonderful. He's always such a wonderful listener and is clearly very engaged with us and everybody else who is speaking. So as always, I really, really appreciate him and all of the work that he does. And I was grateful he was there. And I also do hope that he will add his voice more prominently in the conversation about education reform.
Yeah, me too. One thing that I caught during his reflection at the end of the speakers and then in his answers to the questions that you posed and the Youth Commission members posed, was he noted that the Senate by amendment had put in an amendment stipulating that DESE begin work to prepare for a foundation budget review, that's the Chapter 70, and a municipal contribution review. And one thing that was meaningful to me is that the secretary said he would look forward to doing that. And that's a pretty public thing for him to say, and something the Senate can use as we go into conference committee with the House to say, he said it in our communities that he wants to do this work. So let's get this going.
Yeah.
So that was that was one good thing. Many good things came out of the budget, but that was one of our very biggest priorities, was getting something across the line. And I'm glad the Senate did. And I was gladder still that the secretary spoke about it on his own, right? And then actually spoke very warmly about the work. And at the end, he actually, we had a high five together, which was like, our version, I think, of a handshake on this.
That's really great to hear.
Yeah.
I know in Northampton and across Western Mass, that'll be very well received. And as always, thank you for all of your work in the Senate. And yeah.
Well, I'm only as good as the people I represent. And since you are so extraordinary, it makes it easier for me and my team to do this work, because you set a really, really high bar. So could you just help characterize some of what was said today, from the different schools that were represented, or what struck you the most?
Yeah. So there were 7 districts that presented, and topics ranged from a variety of challenges that we've collectively experienced. I think one of the things that struck me the most was seeing other students present. I think there were 3, maybe 4 districts who had students give their presentations. And it was just really wonderful for me to see other kids who are involved in these conversations. And again, I thank the superintendents who kind of made their teams inclusive of kids. So just hearing experiences from other districts was really wonderful for me and for my peers, I think. And then yeah, topics ranged from like Northampton, we spoke about general education reform with restructuring of formulas like Chapter 70 and the circuit breaker and charter school reform. Other districts talked about rural aid and regional transportation, as well as special education costs and kind of the shortfalls that there are in state funding around those particular issues. Um, yeah.
Yeah. That was a perfect synopsis. You know, what was striking to me, and this is, as you know, we've had lots of exchanges with the secretary, some of them public. You know, striking to me was the diversity of issues facing districts. You know, for Northampton and Amherst, for example, as you suggested, charter school was top on the list because we are affected by you know, Pioneer Valley Performing Arts or the Chinese Immersion Charter School or Hilltown. Again, these are not bad institutions. The thing that has to change is the way the state resources them, right? And that's my job. I always say we don't, my job is not to tell a family or a student where to go to school. My job is to make sure there's equitable access to funding for education. And so I work at a different level, more of a system level, not a personal choice level on education. But that just spoke to me so much about the need to have this Foundation Budget Review Municipal Contribution Review Commission, because no one size fits all solution exists. Because what's going to help Northampton may not help Pioneer. Did that come through for you?
Yeah, I think what was really great about the way the presentations kind of ended up going was everybody was able to kind of express their each individual experience and what they need. But it did kind of culminate into this larger picture of reform that's needed. So I was really happy that that kind of came across. I think it came across pretty well. Um, and and yeah, each district focused on particular things, like you said, Amherst on charter school, Pioneer Valley on regional transportation, etc. So I thought that that was really great and very important to have each individual advocacy for on behalf of their districts as well as just a broader picture.
Yeah, and they began to paint the picture for the secretary of that other side of the formula, right? So if education formula is 2 parts, right? Chapter 70, or what a community gets, and then the municipal contribution funding, or what the community contributes. You know, some districts really had pretty crazy numbers to share, right? Where Chapter 70 may have just gone up a few percentage points over a decade. Their net school spending, or what they have to contribute, has gone up exponentially faster and greater. And that has to do with lots of different factors that, like communities' wealth, for example. But they're just not evening out at all and leaving communities in a harder position, with the state's share of public education funding getting smaller in communities like Northampton, not either staying sort of status quo or getting bigger to deal with increased cost. What did you think about some of the things that they raised? Like, was it interesting that they talked about things like healthcare, for example, as being a cost driver, or even the fixed costs, maintenance? You know, do you think that you came into this thinking that the budget would, you know, the impact of the expenditures would be as vast as it is for districts?
I mean, districts, cities have many responsibilities, and I think, as fixed expenditures and other aspects of city funding rise with inflation, just as any cost would, our funding has remained stagnant for schools. And so I'm not surprised that other aspects of city funding came into the picture, because the reality is like all of our municipalities have multiple what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, needs to fund.
Yes,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I think, you know, not having increases in education spending makes it very hard for municipalities to prioritize and to figure out how to stretch budgets to accommodate the rising costs of fixed expenses,
Mm.
as well as the rising costs of education, especially since the pandemic and kind of the learning loss and the needs that we see in our schools that are also rising.
Mm. That's well said. So, it's a pretty turbulent time, and I'm sorry you're coming of age and will be graduating during this real turbulence, although I'm heartened by the fact that someone like you is, emerging as such a leader, and you're going to go on to do this, beautiful work in your life. Um, could you just say a notch more about what draws you? To work for education. You've talked often about equity when I've heard you speak, equity in education. Could you just say a little bit more about the promise that you see in the state getting education funding right?
Yeah. I mean, I know myself, my peers on the Youth Commission, like we're very, very fortunate and very privileged to have a platform to be able to speak on these issues. And I think for many students, they don't always have the same opportunities. And that's in terms of involvement in groups like ours and just opportunities in school. And the reality is the funding cuts that we see from the state and in our municipality, they end up kind of harming our most vulnerable students. So students on IEPs or students who are low income. And so it really is an equity issue. And I know I will always continue to keep using my voice and encouraging others to speak up on behalf of our whole community. I think that's really important. And I'm hopeful that as state funding starts to become more equitable, we'll see improvements in the quality of our education and the outcomes for our education throughout our community.
That is a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful aspiration. And we're going to hold fast to that and work like heck together. It feels like we get you for one more year as a young leader, around education
I'll be
spending.
around.
Already thinking about what we have to do next, Amelia.
Mhm.
Although I don't think Secretary Tutwiler can say for one second that we haven't made the case,
Mhm.
thanks to your leadership, right? As
As
he
well.
said, he's been out here. I invited him out when he was first installed, and he met with all of the superintendents in the region. Then he toured Bridge Street, then Pioneer. Then you went to see him, and then you invited him out here. And so it's, we keep escalating our contact with him thanks to you. And I think it actually grows more meaningful. I do think he's quite partial to hearing, as he should, from young leaders. I think that's
Yeah.
exactly what's needed.
Yeah, and I mentioned it before, but I so appreciate that about him.
Yeah,
He's
me
just
too.
such a welcoming person. He's very engaged. So it was really wonderful to speak with him today.
So we mentioned that you're going to be a senior next year, which is, really unbelievable to me, since I've known you for such a very long time. I've had the privilege of seeing you grow up, as it were. I feel like such an old woman. Can you just say, if it's not too nosy of me, what are you thinking of after college?
Yeah, I mean,
After high school? I made a little
yeah.
comment in there that college.
No, no.
But what are you thinking of after high school?
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I would like to go to college, and I think I will pursue political science and music. I'm very passionate about music.
Beautiful.
And I think I will, I mean, I hope to go to law school and just kind of go from there, but I know I will continue to stay engaged in local conversations. I think right now I do want to go into politics and policy. But again, we'll see if that changes. But for now, that's what I hope to do.
Oh, Amelia, I think everyone listening to this has to feel good about the future of the world, that you, Amelia Durbin, want to go into politics. Because, government is good, but it's only good if we make it good, right? You see the value of people power on the outside, and you see what it is to demand that people on the inside pay attention to what's needed. Boy, not that you should know exactly where you want to be as a junior in high school, but you have my vote.
Well, I do.
An elected position for sure of your choosing.
Thank you.
I think that's probably all the time we have right now. But thank you, everybody who's listening to this, for joining. As I mentioned at the top of this segment with Amelia, this won't be the last conversation we have with thought leaders in the Commonwealth. Amelia is our fourth guest, and we had to have her on. We had to sort of change direction just because of the organizing I've seen her do, our team has seen her do, and what she has achieved. So please feel free to send your topics that you'd like us to cover, who you'd like us to talk with, and the questions or feedback that you have, and we'll get on it. So thank you so much, Amelia, for your time. Thank you for the work you're leading on the Youth Commission at the high school and all you do. And take good care, everybody.
Thank you so much. Really great to speak with you. And
Great to see you.